On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Tony Lewis, a veteran educator with extensive experience in the public school systems of New York, Florida, and Maryland. A specialist in advanced instruction, he has primarily taught International Baccalaureate, advanced placement literature courses, and served as an MYP coordinator. His pedagogy is rooted in the belief that learning is both critical and contextual, an active process in which students collaborate to construct meaning and engage deeply with the world around them. Mr. Lewis is also a staunch advocate for educational equity, holding that all students deserve meaningful access to higher education. In pursuit of this mission, he has taught literature and critical race theory courses for Upward Bound programs at Morehouse College and Rollins College. Over the past 3 years, he has also pioneered the teaching of hip-hop history and culture at the secondary level in Maryland, one of the few such courses in the state. Through his Power Dreaming initiative, Mr. Lewis remains committed to amplifying student voices by fostering direct dialogue with leading scholars, artists, and thought leaders without intermediaries. His career reflects both a passion for intellectual rigor and a dedication to cultivating joy, engagement, and empowerment in the classroom. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Mr. Tony Lewis, educator and IB NYP coordinator in a high school in the DMV area. How are you doing today?
I'm doing phenomenal. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here. It's always exciting to be able to talk to people who are not stuck in the ivory tower of the academy and are doing Black Studies work in other spaces. So I'm very excited to have you on today.
Yeah, excited to be here as well.
So let's dive in. How did you get into Black Studies as a field, and what keeps you committed to doing the work of Black Studies?
So I was born in 1973. So a couple of years ago, there was this anniversary that was being celebrated. And that was the anniversary of hip hop. So for me, hip hop is a multidisciplinary exercise, just like Black Studies. And just to go ahead and give you an example, I'll start with KRS-One's My Philosophy. He has a line: a vegetarian, no goat, no ham, no chicken, no turkey, no hamburger, because to me, that's suicide, self-murder. Then there's RZA from 12 Jewels, the pre-existence of mathematical biochemical equations, the manifestations of rock, plant, air, fire, and water, which are in its basic formation, solid, liquid, and gases that cause the land masses and the space catalyst. I mean, if you look at just those two songs, they're talking about health, chemistry, geology, physics. And I just got to talk about Black Thought, one of my favorite MCs, just the line that he has on the song 215. Dignity and sanity is what the game costs you. Wake up with the paddles on your chest. We had lost you. I'm just painting the picture like Kerry James Marshall. I'm just taking the picture like Carrie Mae Weems. So smile and say cheese. We in 2018 in the pyramid scheme, nightmares and daydreams. Cardiology, psychology, economics, photography, visual arts, sociology, philosophy, all in those lyrics. So for me, it demonstrates how hip hop often functions as cultural criticism. It weaves together artistic references, social commentary. We talked about medical imagery in that piece, and economic critique to paint a picture, the complex picture of what it means to be living as a Black man in this contemporary society, as well as a Black woman and someone who's part of the LGBTQ plus community as well, because I don't want to leave anybody out.
Well, thank you. I know that, the anniversary of hip hop a couple years ago was definitely something that many people celebrated and talked about in multiple spaces. And hip hop, the intersection of hip hop and education is something that has been an increasing field over the past probably 20 years or so at this point. I know you mentioned prior, before we started recording, that you teach hip hop history. Do you want to speak a little bit about that course and how that came about?
Oh yeah, definitely. Got to shout out the OG, Kenneth Smith, who's at one of the local high schools here in DMV. The origin story is he just was feeling very lackluster. He was trying to go ahead and find meaning in what he was doing in the classroom. And around that time, this was maybe about 6 years ago, he visited the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and he was so inspired by what he saw in there and just the space itself that he decided to go ahead and pursue one of his passions, which was the fusion of hip hop and academia. And so he, wrote a proposal for the course. The county approved it, and he started teaching it. And he wasn't satisfied with just, his high school having it. He decided to go ahead and basically spread that gospel to other high schools who were interested in the course. My high school ended up being one of those high schools. And when I had the opportunity to teach it, I definitely jumped on it because hip hop has informed so much of, my mental outlook, whether it's when it comes to, socioeconomic issues, whether it comes to personal philosophical issues about life and what it means to go ahead and exist on this physical plane. So for me, it was just a natural marriage. And when I first started teaching in the classroom back in the early 2000s, I really didn't have a blueprint. And so I wanted to go ahead and bring as much of my lived experience and my cultural sensibilities into the classroom, because I was dealing with a very Eurocentric curriculum
Mhm.
that did not speak to the daily experiences of my students. And I didn't have the language for it then because, I was a novice to the field. But I found out later that, me bringing in hip hop, um, literature that is based in the African American experience or the Latino experience or the Asian experience, I was doing something that was called culturally responsive teaching. Right.
Mhm.
And so hip hop was a big, big, big factor in me, connecting with my students to go ahead and celebrate, you know, the plethora of experiences that they bring into the classroom.
Thank you. I wanna build on that a little bit and ask you about your trajectory as an educator. As we were talking about before, there are not a lot of, Black male educators. The overwhelming majority of K-12 teachers are white women. Um, so one, I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit about why you decided to go into education, but also how Black studies has influenced your approach to educating in the K-12 space.
Oh, so I'm a proud Rattler graduate of Florida A&M University. I wasn't the best college student. And so I went through about three majors and I ended up in a course. It was the Black experience in the 20th century. It was taught by a legend. His name was Dr. Hemingway. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go back to a documentary that was very controversial. It was called Waiting for Superman.
Mhm.
About this. I think he's some Hollywood executive or figure that was trying to go ahead and decide whether he was going to put his children in a public school or in a private school. And there was a term that came out of that documentary that was very controversial, and it was a failure factory because that was the title that certain schools had when it came to the graduation rate and the lack of, I guess, success a lot of the students experienced during their time at those schools. And when I had to go ahead and analyze and reflect on my K through 12 experience, unfortunately, I went through a lot of failure factories. I was very ill prepared for the rigors that I was encountered with when I went to Florida A&M University. Hence, why I said I went through 3 majors, and I was at a space where I was in limbo. I didn't realize I didn't know what direction I wanted to go into, and so I take Dr. Hemingway's class, and that was the first time I was excited about being in a classroom because I didn't know what I was going to go ahead and learn that day that was going to go ahead and just basically make my mind explode, to go ahead and use the colloquial term. He was just dropping bombs every day, just
Mhm.
dropping bombs, dropping bombs. And I fell in love with Black studies in his classroom. And I said, you know what? When I get out of here, I want to go ahead and do the same thing for young people in the K through 12 setting that I'm experiencing on the collegiate level. And so when I came into the classroom space, I just wanted basically to be a carbon copy of Dr. Hemingway. At the same time, that same year, um, Dr. John Henry Clark came to Florida A&M, and I had no idea who he was. I was in the introduction to sociology course, and my professor was like, if you go see this man, you'll get a certain amount of extra credit. And one day I wasn't doing too well in the course, so I was like, hey, let me go ahead, go get this extra credit. I remember I showed up late. He was just about to come onto the stage. I didn't even get a chance to hear the introduction, but he was in a wheelchair then. They rolled him out onto the stage. He was blind, but he had just a presence, and he had a walking stick that was about at least 5 foot tall, and it was carved. And he raised the walking stick up, and he just banged it on the auditorium, the stage floor, and the sound reverberated throughout the auditorium. And he spoke for 2 hours nonstop. And I was rapt. I hung on every word. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to dedicate the rest of my life to.
That's so one amazing that you got to hear him speak in person. Um, but also I think so indicative of the path that so many people take to Black studies. It's an educator, it's a teacher, it's a professor, it's somebody who opens your mind to what's possible, like to be able to do this thing. I didn't Black studies was not something that I knew about until I got to college, and then it was like, "Oh, I can do this? Like this is a thing that's the rest of their lives? Like I wanna go do that." Um, so I think that that's a really important story, and collecting how different people came to it. It's so interesting that so often it is through relationship, it is through learning, it is through somebody who took the time out to make that kind of investment and allow students to see themselves in the curriculum. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no problem.
So you teach hip hop history and culture, and then you're at an IB school. So you also teach literature and language, right?
Yep. Literature and language. Yep. Lang and lit.
So how does Black studies influence even the way that you approach literature and language or your classrooms in general? Um, Particularly when we're thinking about a course that is designed for a student to pass a particular test to get a particular type of credit.
Yeah. So I always tell my students, this is an IB Lang and lit course taught through in a very Afrocentric lens because I have to be real to who I am. All right. And so basically, I situate myself at the intersection of like African American literature and Black studies. Right. And so we always start with either Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison
Mhm.
and or Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God. Um, and we pair it with a black visual artist or a black musician, right? And because I'm trying to go ahead and bring my students into a conversation with writers and artists whose work emerges from, responds to, and reshapes the Black experience. And so my work in the classroom is never confined to the borders of literature alone, right? Because Black literature has never existed in isolation. It's always been in dialogue with music, dance, film. And so I teach and analyze in a way that moves across disciplines.
That's so interesting, to bring in the more, I guess, or, the creative arts. Um, Not that writing isn't creative, but when people think about language and literature, they typically are not considering the music or the artwork that can accompany it. So I think that it's reflective of Black studies and the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary nature of the field, but also a way to engage your students in thinking differently and not confining themselves to a particular box, which I'm sure is very impactful, and helpful for them.
Yes, it definitely is, right? For me, it's about seeing art, whether it's literary or performing arts, the performing arts, basically as a living archive of, Black life, struggle. And one thing that I focus on because I'm not into trauma porn is Black joy, right?
Mhm.
And so my intellectual practice definitely is all about being multidisciplinary because Black creativity has always been like, just for me, expansive, boundary crossing, and in conversation with the full range of human expression. I think of freestyle fellowships song Inner City Boundaries, where they're like, I gotta be righteous, I gotta be me, I gotta be conscious, I gotta be free, I gotta be able, I gotta attack, I gotta be stable, I gotta be Black. So, hip hop, once again, you know, is basically the root of everything that I do in the classroom.
Well, I think that that makes sense, and hip hop by itself is so expansive and allows for the integration of so many different things in discussing the lived realities of Black people, both here and throughout the diaspora and on the continent, that I think it definitely makes sense, and that's something that I think is one of the reasons why hip hop ed has become so appealing, and utilized in different spaces. I know when I was at NYU, I was fortunate enough to be able to work with the Hip Hop Ed Center that was there at the time, and it was so fun and so informative, and that's probably the I probably learned more during those 2 years of my life than at any other time because it did allow for the integration of so many things together in a way that's not done in the traditional classroom space, whether that's K-12 or in undergrad.
Yeah, especially given that, we're practice, unfortunately K through 12 education is rooted, in a very Eurocentric mode of education that does not reward or celebrate diversity, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of my students struggle to go ahead and feel engaged in the classroom. And so, one of the things that we're pushing for at my high school is an academic pathway that allows students to go ahead and see themselves in what they're learning and to contextualize their experiences in a way that they feel celebrated and not tolerated in the academic space.
Mhm. Yeah, it's going against that banking method of education where these are the things you need to learn them, and then go get your job to continue contributing to the capitalism of the society. Um, Having those opportunities, um, I'm sure it allows the students at a much younger age than you or I were able to be able to see that there are other ways and there are other things that you can learn and build on and do. You don't have to There are different ways to think about things, and there are ways to ensure that you are centering your identities in learning about the world. It doesn't have to be from that Eurocentric perspective.
Exactly. One of the things that um, I'm doing right now when it comes to my work as an educator, and let me go ahead and kind of go back to when I first started teaching. When I first started teaching, I was confronted with a lot of apathy when it came to English, right? Because a lot of students were used to reading text where they did not feel like their lived experiences were being celebrated. And given the fact also that this was during a time where standardized testing was on the rise, a lot of what I was told, from the higher ups was you need to go ahead and get these test scores up. And so the classroom became a space of anxiety, became a space of pressure, cultural erasure. And I basically was trying to go ahead and rekindle, spark an interest when it came to what literature can do for you in your life and how it is something that can go ahead and just broaden, your cultural imagination, and also to go ahead and um, have my students see themselves as scholars, um, have my students view education as not something that is extrinsically motivated, but intrinsically motivated. Right. And so that was a lot of the work that I was doing at the beginning. The space that I'm in now is I am blessed with having a lot of students who are very motivated, right? Who are invested in their education, but they're not only invested in, as you say, the transactional um, aspect of education. Let me go ahead, get these good grades so I can go ahead and get to this top 25 college or university. They actually want to go ahead and be rooted in work that's not only going to go ahead and empower their um, classmates who are not necessarily thriving in the academic space as they should, but also to go ahead and look at certain issues going on in their community where they can go ahead and affect change. And so we have an organization that was started last year called the Equity Justice Initiative. And our tagline is Power Dreaming Students Reclaiming Joy in Education, where we wanted to go ahead and enact change, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, because real change a lot of times happens from the grassroots.
Mhm.
And just like Black Studies, came out of student activism, same thing that we're trying to go ahead and mimic at my high school. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is to go ahead and center our first initiative on on what's going on in the classroom and how we can go ahead and transform that experience from something that's not so carceral into something that's liberating. And so the first scholar that we had was Bettina Love. We read both of her books. We had podcasts that was all student run. We had town halls. We had artwork that centered around her work. And then when she came to the school, she was interviewed by the students after she gave a brief 30-minute presentation. It was something so liberating, not only for the students, but also for their teachers and the parents as well, when it came to the possibilities of what can happen in the classroom when it's not taught from strictly a Eurocentric lens. And we had Clint Smith come as well, Judy Richardson, and this year we have a whole roster of speakers that we're trying to bring to go ahead and continue that dialogue between the students and thought leaders who are wrestling with a lot of the questions that they're facing, not only in the classroom but in their communities. So we can go ahead and actually have real change.
That's amazing. I'm a little curious about that process, right? So if you would like to expand on, like, what does that look like to have students engaging with the work by Clint Smith or by Bettina Love, um, and what type of ideas is it generating in them?
Ooh, what does that look like? It looks like I get no sleep. All right. And so what I didn't mention was this is an endeavor, not just at my high school, but two other high schools as well. And so the students at my high school felt that, hey, we don't want to go ahead and do this work in a silo because we know that we're not the only ones experiencing some of the micro and macro aggressions in the classroom. And we know that there are students who actually want to go ahead and do something about it. And so they partnered, this is all of them, they partnered with two other high schools. Um, they have Zoom meetings where they come up with the agenda, right? They put themselves into different subgroups. So you're going to go ahead and handle the town halls. You're going to go ahead and handle um, the art that's going to be generated. You guys are going to go ahead and handle the podcast, right? They go ahead and separate, then they come back and they talk about, hey, this is where we're at with the podcast. What do you think? What direction should we go in? And so basically, even though they're in different groups, they're constantly in dialogue to go ahead and inform each other as to the direction they're going through, getting feedback in order to go ahead and get the most out of whatever component that they're a part of, right? Because they definitely want to be well informed when the our author comes to town, right? And so then they generate a list of questions for the authors. They run them by a group of educators that I work with during this process. We, give them our critiques. They go ahead and take it back to their groups. They go ahead and refine those questions, give them back to us, and we're usually like, yeah, thumbs up. And speaker comes to town, and they get a chance to kick it a little bit before the speaker speaks, and then afterwards, then they kick it with the speaker, interview the speaker, and then after that, um, we have a meeting where we kind of reflect on what we think went right with just everything that went into the program where we could go ahead and improve. One of the things that has come out of it is I have a lot of students who want to actually pursue, Africana studies, Black studies, African history on the collegiate level. So that's one thing where they're seeing this, oh my gosh, this is a field. I have a lot of students who say, hey, I want to go ahead and dedicate my life to this scholarship as a writer, right? And so I know just our president of EJI this year, she's definitely someone um, who I know in the future is going to be a voice, powerful voice in the Black Studies field. And Also, they're thirsty to go ahead and do more in the community because they don't just want this to be an intellectual exercise. They actually want to affect real change. And so we have a project that I don't want to talk too much about because we don't have our funding yet, where they're going to be in dialogue with business leaders and people in government to go ahead and impact some of these socioeconomic challenges that a lot of people in the community are facing.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's for students to be able to take ownership of their learning in that way, in K-12 is something that just isn't as seen or encouraged in a lot of spaces. So that's super interesting. Thank you so much for sharing more about that.
And
Um,
I would be remiss, Dr. Nubi, if I didn't mention that we are blessed at our high school to have a foundation that's able to go ahead and fund this because getting those speakers is not free or cheap.
no.
So that was one thing that I definitely took advantage of that wasn't being taken advantage of before. So uh, I just had to go ahead and mention that.
Well, no, that's yeah, those are some huge names. And I know that that is not a cheap that is not an endeavor that is friendly for all budgets at that scale. But I think that just the idea of bringing in speakers and having students coordinate real conversation and dialogue with them and setting up all of these things around it, podcasts and artwork and all of those things, that's something that can be done at different scales in different places. It allows students to really think about what is interesting to them and how they want to engage with each other as well as the community around them in really powerful ways.
Yeah, definitely.
So I wanted to ask, although you've kind of touched on this, so if you feel like you have covered this, then that's fine. But what interests you most about the past of the field of Black studies?
Mm, I'm a big fan of the Black Power movement, right? And, Black Studies for me, just was born out of that. And so everything that I do when it comes to the origin story of my teaching is rooted in that legacy of struggle because I see my classroom as a site of knowledge production and a space for empowerment where literature, music, art, and film are tools for my students to go ahead and reclaim narrative authority when it comes to these living traditions of resistance and creativity. So, for example, when we read Toni Morrison, right, we're engaging with her in an intricate excavation of cultural memory and historical trauma. Octavia Butler, it pushes my students to imagine speculative futures shaped by ancestral lessons, right? And August Wilson, for me, is one of my biggest muses. I'm an acolyte of August Wilson. And for me, August Wilson is not only a dramatist, but he's an archivist, right? And so if you could bear with me, like piano lesson is one of my most favorite pieces of drama that was ever created. And the boy Willie character has um a line when he's talking about his heart. And he says, "Sometime it beats louder. When it beats louder, then everybody can hear it. Some people get scared of that, like Bernice. Some people get scared to hear a nigga's heart beating. They think you ought to lay low with that heart, make it be quiet and go along with everything the way it is. But my mama ain't birthed me for nothing. So what I gotta do? I gotta mark my passing on the road, just like you ride on a tree. Boy, Willie was here, right?" And so for me, what I love about the field is just it's a reclamation exercise that started you know way back in the 60s and is still going on now.
Thank you. I think that I've really been struck just this entire conversation about the importance and the impact of the art, right? On how you come to teaching and thinking about the world and thinking about Black studies. I think too often, particularly in university spaces, the written word becomes primary, even though that is not
Mm.
historically accurate for many Black populations and communities, right? Like oral history and music has always been foundational to the ways in which we communicate and archive and express ourselves. But being in the institution of a university, they put so much weight on that written portion that it can be too often there can be a divorcing from that creative
Mm.
or the other ways of expressing oneself. And so having that reaffirmed or just reminded is very helpful. I think particularly in these moments.
Well,
Um,
the mother of my children, she's a visual artist, so I can't help but not only look at text in the literary sense, but also in the visual sense.
mhm.
That is the way that she sees the world, right? And so that also impacted on my practice, right? And so I definitely want to go ahead and shout her out for that because it's not just me, right? So for example, I just think about when she introduced me to the work of John Biggers. I fell in love with the particular piece, Starry Crown, right? Because when I looked at it, spoke to me because, it turned like African cosmology into a visual map of survival.
Mhm.
Also, we discovered the work of John Coltrane, at the same time. And like a love supreme for me models a kind of artistic freedom that defies the structural limitations that, you were talking about, so
Yeah, no, that's yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense.
yeah.
Um, and it's so important to think about the visual arts and the performing arts in that way, and to take seriously the messages that they're communicating. Uh, so often, it's not about entertainment; it's about communicating a message.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Uh, for me, it's narrative laying, right? In the Black or, oral tradition. And so I see my role as an educator to like equip my students not only to go ahead and understand this heritage, but to go ahead and be part of the creation of the, next production of Black cultural expression in all of those different forms.
So I'm curious as to two things. One, what interests you most about where Black studies is going, or maybe even where it can or should go? I'm also curious, since you said, like, your students engage with Octavia Butler, as many of us have been engaging with Octavia Butler over the
Mhm.
past year in particular. Um,
Yeah, that Parable series. Ooh, that's
yeah,
prophetic.
that's it's a lot, and it's very reminiscent of things that are happening. So, I know that even in conversations that I've had, like, with my friends, that the Parable series is a lot.
Mhm.
How do students engage with such a heavy text, particularly when you can see so many parallels to things that are happening or could very feasibly happen soon, with where we're currently at?
So, you want me to answer that one first,
Yeah,
or
you can answer that one first. I'm sorry, I was just that just struck 'cause I didn't read Parable till I was grown, so I'm like, how do students deal with that?
So, we Parable, I haven't had a chance to teach it in the classroom. Um, I've taught it. We have BSU book club, so we read Parable in our the Black Student Union book club at my high school, and the students at first were like, "Yo, this is terrifying! Like, this is what's happening now." But when you get to the second book, right, especially towards the end, you can see the possibility of, you know, what a committed group of multicultural voices can do to go ahead and change the world, in
Mhm.
spite of a very authoritarian and oppressive political structure, right? And so the one thing I love about Octavia Butler is her narratives always have a through line of what's possible
Yeah.
when a group, and it's not usually a large group, a small group of people are committed to change. And so I think that is what, if my students were here to speak, is what they got out of that text. Because once again, one of the things that we're rooted in is Black joy, Black joy, Black joy, Black and brown joy.
Okay. Thank you. That was just I just wondered because it is, like, especially the first one is very, hard.
Yeah, the first one is hard.
The second one does provide a little bit more of that, uh, hope and possibility, in ways that are necessary and just reflective of reality, right? Like, Octavia Butler wasn't a psychic. She looked at what the world looked like when she wrote that book and could see the trajectory that the country was on and very accurately was able to predict several of the things that are happening around the exact same time that she said they would. So,
Yeah,
um,
she was a news junkie. So
yeah.
when we spoke before, I told you I got a chance to go ahead and meet her at Yari Yari Pembari, which was a literary conference that NYU used to host. And after her talk, she took time to speak to us for an extended period of time, and she was just saying that, hey, I, like you said, I just watch the news and I look at certain patterns that are throughout history, and I look at what's going on now, and that helped informed a lot of what I wrote in the parable. There's a quote by Octavia that I love. There is nothing new under the sun, but there are new suns.
Mhm.
And the reason I refer to that quote is just to go back to what we were talking about. Even though the news is gloom and doom, there's always hope, for, light to go ahead and take hold, in the midst of, the darkness that we're all experiencing, especially given our current climate in this country. And that's where I see my role as an educator, to go ahead and bring that light, to talk about those new sons. Now, if you want me to go ahead and dive into the second question, the present, future.
Yes, you absolutely can.
The thing, so I was talking to my friend. She works for a um big publisher that I won't mention. Don't want to give him a free plug, but she read a book by an author from a different part of from the African continent,
Hmm.
and an author um, who is black but grew up in Asia. And the reason I bring that up is what excites me now about Black study is that it's embracing like global diasporic connections in ways that it necessarily didn't do um, in the past. And the thing I love about the future, where I see the field is going into the future, is embracing technology in a way that is very new and novel, which kind of speaks to me to the whole concept of Afrofuturism, not just as art, but as methodology, a way of thinking about what we can do in the classroom when it comes to struggle. And also, we're going to be partnering with one of your colleagues at UMD. Um, she's part of an organization called Project Stand, and we really want to go ahead and start archiving a lot of the work that we do.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that I'm just super excited about is having our students, go ahead and archive their voices using all of the tools that they have at, their disposal, today, that necessarily weren't tools that were used in Black studies in the past, right? And also, artists like, for me, like Kendrick Lamar, who use hip hop as a living archive, blending social critique with visionary storytell. For me, his work reminds me of James Baldwin, you know, who said that the precise role of the artist is to illuminate that darkness, blaze roads um, through vast forests. And so I'm just excited at how the field now invites that kind of blazing, where scholars, artists, activists can build futures in which Blackness is not a question to be defended, but it's a reality that's celebrated, theorized, and expanded. So basically, Black studies for me feels like an open canvas that's capable of holding the rigor of history and the wild, necessary, radical dreaming that has yet to be imagined.
Well, that is a wonderful point to end on. But is there anything else that you would like to add, say?
No, I just, I don't want, I want to protect the identity of my students, but hey, you guys definitely are the foundation for a lot of what I do. But at the end of the day, the major motivating factors for what I do are my two lovely children. They were the guinea pigs. And they inspire and inform everything that I do. And my partner for over 30 years also, she was definitely someone who also informed a lot of what I do in the classroom, because she's an educator as well. And so, yeah, I definitely want to go ahead and shout them out.
Well, that is wonderful. I'm glad that you did that. I think that, family is so important and is to so often. our children do become the guinea pigs and the ones who we're engaging with these ideas first. Um, so yeah. Well, thank you so, so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Um, and I know that your summer is even shorter than my summer is. So I'm gonna give you some of your time back. But I appreciate you being here today.
Appreciate that. All right. I'm so happy to be part of the Black Studies podcast family. And um, I hope we can get some of my students on here in the future.
I actually
So
was
they
gonna
can
ask
go
you
ahead.
about that. So,
Yeah.
yes, we will talk about that when we stop the recording because I definitely think that would be a wonderful addition.
Yeah. Because they're all about speaking truth to power without interpreters. So, we definitely got to get them on here.
We can do that.